The Defence Minister Peter Dutton is with me now from Canberra. Thanks, Minister, for coming in.
Pleasure, Leigh. Thank you.
Regarding what we just aired, around a decade ago there were a spate of stories and inquiries into that kind of behaviour, and the public was assured that the military had cleaned it up. Does that story suggest that that in fact is not the case?
Well, it's obviously very disturbing. That's the first point, and I feel for Alistair, for his family, in particular for his mum and no doubt his mates who are deeply affected by what they've seen and by what he's experienced. It's appropriate, absolutely proper that Defence has reported this now to the Victorian Police, and they'll do their own internal investigation. And obviously, as was detailed by Alistair's solicitor there will be a civil action that's initiated. So those processes are underway, and the courts will now deal with that. It
used to be a cultural issue, though, in the military. How confident are you that it is not a cultural and systemic issue now?
Well, yeah, I mean, the first point to make is that we're dealing with a workforce of tens of thousands, and you've got over the course of that 10-year period, no doubt in excess of 100,000 people that would come through Defence or close to that being employed, both in regular and reserves and within the department at any one time. So, can I say to you that everybody conducts themselves at an acceptable standard? No, but do 99.9% of people conduct themselves in a way that would make us proud? Absolutely. And in the 0.1%, and this case, on the face of it, is one of those cases, we will deal with it very harshly. And I'll send this very clear message to anybody within the Australian Defence Force that behaviour is completely unacceptable. We have a professional expectation from our people. They deliver it. And in the circumstances where they don't, people can expect to be separated from the Australian Defence Force because they aren't welcome within the ranks of the ADF.
Turning to other matters, you recently said that it was inconceivable that Australia would not back the US if there were ever a war with China over Taiwan. Today, the Shadow Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong said that remark was amping up national security concerns to help the coalition win re-election next year. What's your response to that?
Well, Penny Wong's speech today could have been written by Paul Keating, and we saw his outburst at the press club only a couple of weeks ago, and it's only 68 days since Anthony Albanese said that he was in lockstep with the government on AUKUS,
but what about
which is the biggest announcement. Well, I think when you look at what they've said, they're now starting to crab walk away from commitment to what is the biggest national security plan in recent history. This will guarantee our security into years to come.
I want you to just address the substance of her remark, which is that the coalition's using national security to help it win re-election. It does have form on that. 2001, asylum seekers coming by boat and terrorism. 2004, terrorism. 2013, boats again.
Well, Leigh, I mean, the boats did start under Labor, and they did put kids into detention. Let's be very clear about that. That's factual. And at the moment, I'm not making up the Chinese Communist Party's approach to Taiwan. They've been very clear about their intention. They've been clear about timelines. They've been clear about reunification. They are ramping up their naval and military assets at an historic level. We know at the moment they have in their fleet about 355 submarines and ships, and by 2030, within this decade, that number will go to 460. They're producing on a tonnage rate a bigger number of boats and submarines over an 18-month period than what the Royal Navy has in its entire fleet. So if somebody thinks that we're exaggerating some of the difficulties and the concerns that we have in the Indo-Pacific, I think they're denying the reality of the situation within our own region.
But why do you assume, though, that Australia would automatically back the US in a confrontation over Taiwan, given that Australia's relationship with China is profoundly important to its economic prosperity and Australia's a sovereign nation?
It's an incredibly important relationship, and I want the relationship with China to normalise as quickly as possible. But the Chinese government has delivered to Australia a list of 14 requirements for us to meet before that relationship is normalised, including giving up essentially freedom of speech and many of our democratic rights, which we will never do as a sovereign nation.
But do you really think Australians would have the appetite to follow the US into another war after Iraq and Afghanistan?
Leigh, I think if you look at what's happening in the Indo-Pacific at the moment and you see the ramp up by the Communist Party of China, we need to be realistic about the threat now and over the course of the next couple of decades. And there's no sense sticking your head in the sand, pretending it's not happening. We want prevailing peace in our region. We have millions of people that have been lifted from poverty since the Second World War, since the Vietnam War, and we want that to continue. But when you look at what's happening in the South China Sea, where China now has a presence in 20 different locations, when you see what's happening in the East China Sea, where they're bumping up against the Japanese Coast Guard, when you see the conflict between India and China on their land border, when you see what is happening in the conflict between Thailand and China at the moment, these are concerning events. And I don't think me being dishonest with the Australian people is in our national interest.
The Prime Minister's truthfulness has been in the spotlight recently. Is Scott Morrison telling the truth when he says he's never told a lie in public life?
Yes, and I think if people, are throwing around slurs in public life now, which is way too easy with social media, we're all a subject of all sorts of vicious allegations and complaints. People say things now that I don't think they would have said a decade or two ago.
They
if somebody's
do.
got an allegation to make, they should make it.
They do, but to address the substance of it, you never felt that you were misled or lied to in the lead up to the Turnbull leadership spill, which you contested and he then won?
No, I didn't. And I can say from my own perspective, and it's been my experience with Scott Morrison as well, that, we've conducted ourselves in an honourable way. And if people have an allegation to make to the contrary, they should detail it instead of putting out some innuendo out there, which is not backed up by any fact. And it's done solely to smear the Prime Minister, which is what the Premiers are doing in concert with Anthony Albanese at the moment, and it should be called out. Is
Scott Morrison attempting to court the anti-vax vote with his comments about people being sick of being told what to do by governments?
No, he's not, Leigh. And I've watched this very closely, and I've been on the National Security Committee that's dealt with COVID since day one. We've made some tough decisions over the course of the last 2 years in terms of borders, in terms of making ventilators, masks, dealing with product lines running out in shopping centres, and dealing with the lockdown, the rollout of the vaccine that people have been critical of. But I'll tell you now, when I speak to my friends in Europe or the United States or Asia, Australia is in an incredibly fortunate position because of the decisions that we have made. And I think if we're looking to the future now, we want to make sure that we can get the economy right so that people can get back into jobs, that those small businesses can regenerate again. If we do that, that gives our country the best chance of the best recovery in the world, which I think is what people are now seeking.
Peter Dutton, thanks for your time tonight.
Thanks, Leigh.
Hi, I'm Leigh Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 7:30's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.